Well, a vigorous upper-level low continues to slowly move across the plains. It's the focus for severe storms and possible tornadoes today and tomorrow. So here's quite the little spin here across southwestern Nebraska. Looks like a little hurricane on land, and lots of shear, meaning rotating winds in different directions, because at each level of the atmosphere, that specific direction and speed of the wind is different. So the shear is across Nebraska today, and the highest shear values are going to be right over eastern Nebraska and the Omaha areas. Those are also the areas that are going to heat up today and really destabilize. We have ongoing showers and thunderstorms in central Nebraska. So an enhanced risk today, level 3 out of 5, that includes just west of Des Moines and through Omaha, so eastern Nebraska. And in particular, not just the tornado risk, 5% probability, but 30% chance of severe hail, 10% chance of significant hail. So a narrow area of significant tornado parameters because of the shear and the energy or buoyancy, that instability, convective available potential energy, all lining up here in that area. So this is looking at, in particular, the NAM models updraft tracks basically in some of the storms, and there are a lot of strong updrafts that could be developing later today into this evening in eastern Nebraska, western Iowa. So that's the area we're going to be watching. Then tomorrow, smaller area, maybe less significant, but the parameters, that significant tornado parameter lining up more across central Iowa. But the chance of tornadoes is a little further north than that parameter tomorrow. We'll explain why. Good data to explain the difference between some of the parameters we look at. 5% probability touches the Minnesota-Iowa border even. Slight risk of severe storms across a swath there of central Iowa into the southernmost point of Minnesota. And when we look at the updrafts tracks through the whole period, we see more of them into Iowa, but also into southern Minnesota tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow evening, even though there's going to be less instability in the southern part of Minnesota. Shear is going to be with us across much of Iowa into southern Minnesota, but shear is just one of many parameters to look at. Shear is looking at different wind speeds and directions with height in the atmosphere, but another thing we look at is called helicity, which kind of measures the same thing. It takes into account the shear and also specifically some of the low-level winds, and you want everything to line up in the same spot. So tomorrow, all the energy, all the juice is in Iowa, but that helicity is spread further north. And so helicity looks at that directional and speed shear, or winds moving in different directions and speeds through the atmosphere, but also the component of those lower level winds that will feed into a storm and become the updraft. So helicity looks at more of a specific element of all this. So shear is kind of these different winds with height, upper level winds moving one direction, lower level another, or much different speeds. But then helicity looks at those sort of inflow winds into the storms and combines all those things together. Now you still need instability as well, so they kind of look at similar things, but helicity kind of gets to be a little bit more specific. And the reason that they don't line up quite tomorrow is because of the low level winds that we'll show you here in just a second. But they're both very important in understanding how organized storms could develop with rotating updrafts. So surface winds today, or just above the surface, 1,500 feet up, lines up with where the shear is. Eastern Nebraska today. So we see kind of a bullseye of some of those higher, lower level winds. And so the helicity is mostly across eastern Nebraska today. That's also where all the energy is. So everything lines up pretty much in that same spot, eastern Nebraska into western Iowa. Now tomorrow it gets a little bit messier. We see those lower level winds across much of central and southern Minnesota, pretty high, 40, 50 miles an hour, in fact, across parts of central Minnesota. And the shear values, highest shear values, are in southern Minnesota and Iowa. But the reason we're not going to have tornadoes in central Minnesota, where the helicity values are highest, is because there just isn't going to be as much energy or destabilization with the sunshine. So you kind of average these areas together, and that's why some of these storms that kind of spin out of the main bands could still be spinning into far southern Minnesota. And we see that already today, kind of. You can see these cells. These aren't severe right now, but you can almost see how each one of them is spinning because they're kind of being forced to by all those surface and mid and upper level winds. So dynamic situations, severe chances for much of the northern plains Friday and Saturday, and then shifts east Sunday.